Hello, and thank you for joining me for another lecture. We are in the process of a virtual tour, taking you to key locations around the country. And after visiting places like Caesarea and Caesarea Philippi and Megiddo, we've been to the Sea of Galilee, we've been to Qumran by the Dead Sea, we're making our way now to Jerusalem. From a certain time in history, when you mention the name Jerusalem to people around the world, it will be connected always to the religious significance. It wasn't always like that. As long as only the Jewish people considered Jerusalem a holy place, the holiest one on the planet, other people did not show any interest in town. It was not a place of strategic significance, and therefore people that showed interest in the country back in the old days, the empires, were interested only on the main trade routes. Jerusalem was not a key location for them. Obviously, after the days of Constantine and then Islam as well, Jerusalem today is a holy place to more than 4 billion people on the planet, and hence a source of controversy as well, etc. But for the life of the local, Jerusalem was from the days of David a place of significance. The centrality of the city, of the temple, of the house of David was located to one geographical location, and that's what makes it so unique in many ways. And therefore today we're going to launch episode 1, and that will be the setting the scene for Jerusalem. We'll speak about the location, we'll speak about the history of the city of David. That's where the story begins. It doesn't start with David. Jerusalem has a more ancient history, and we'll speak about that as well. So that will be episode number 1 that will bring you to the very beginning of the story. And then as we carry on, we'll speak about other eras in history, and you'll have at least a basic understanding of Jerusalem. As always, I'm going to use the technology here. I hope that I'll be able to do that in a more skillful way that I'm doing it so far. And we'll speak about the presentation, the slides that you're accustomed to see, and try to fill in some video segments as well. I hope there won't be any errors. I'm still learning how to do it right. Well, let's go to the very beginning, and the very beginning is always the presentation. We'll bring up the opening slide that you know so well by now. And if you wondered why that's the one that I'm using, again, because most people, when they think about Israel, that's what they think about. They think about a desert, but it's also appropriate when you speak about Jerusalem. You do see that the journey from the Jordan Valley, which is down here, up to Jerusalem, and this is the Judean desert, you can see for yourselves what a climb it would be. Quite steep slopes. If you come from east or north, you're going to climb the road, and this is about 1,350 feet below sea level. Once you reach your destination, you're close to 3,000 feet above sea level. So the journey to Jerusalem was part of the preparation for the spiritual experience as well. This is the slide that I chose to start with, although it's not anything biblical. These are the walls of Jerusalem of today, built by an Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent in the 16th century, 1537 to 1541. But you do see the quote down here, which is coming from Jewish sources, not the Bible. And it says basically about the measures of beauty given to the world. It's a list of 10 measures of wisdom, 10 measures of holiness, 10 measures of suffering. It's only to show you how important is Jerusalem in the heart of the Jewish people, many others as well. Maybe today, for the first time ever, the city is a source of controversy. It's a source of tension in many ways like never before. We should not be surprised. You go to Zechariah chapter 2, that's what the Bible says very clearly. We speak about a place which is a stumbling stone. We speak about a cup of trouble. And today, when you speak about Jerusalem, the first thing that comes to mind is the political tension, the mounting tension on any single level in the area. Unfortunately, that will be the case today. Although the name Jerusalem means in Hebrew, city of peace, this town did not see that much peace in its own history. And as I said, maybe today it's worse than ever as a result of what happens in the region, what happens in the world. So let's go back now to the presentation and start going from era to era and from place to place. We start, as always, by setting the scene, and geographical location is very important. You see, if I've given you a mission to choose a place for a capital in this country, the last place that you will choose will be Jerusalem. If you're given a chance to choose a place that will be the heart of so many people, you try to find a place which is accessible, a place that has a lot of water, beautiful farmland in the area, a large city if possible. Jerusalem would not qualify to be any of those. In fact, we're not even given the reason in the Bible why God chose Jerusalem. The reason is not given. He had his reasons, no doubt. Of course, we made the connection to many traditions that took place in the same location, but we're not given a clear reason, except for the fact that God promises to the people he's going to choose a place, and he was the one to choose Jerusalem. Let's speak about the road system. You know part of the map already. Bringing up now the international highways coming up, but there is another road that we rarely speak about, and that will be the local road. We call it today the way of the patriarchs. And when you read the book of Genesis about the lives of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, they wander from place to place. Very seldom they will leave their comfort zone, which was the mountains, and go down to the international highways. And therefore, we call this one the road of the patriarchs. It's starting on the south of the north. It goes from Beersheba all the way to the plains of Armageddon, plains of Jezreel. And all the locations that you can connect with the lives of Abraham and the others are located along this highway. Places like Shechem and Shiloh and Bethel and Ai and Bethlehem and Hebron. Not Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not on the international road, but not even on the local road. That will be a place of significance. Elevation is about 2,800 feet, although the city is so mountainous, depends what part of town you mean when you give the height or the elevation. But we speak about the place that, although we don't have the reason why, is the most important one. I use this map for just a minute to show you once again to demonstrate the location. When you read Judges 19 about the Levite and his concubine, quite an outrageous story. The Bible tells us that the servant tells the Levite, come, let's stop at the city of the Jebusites. Well, in the Hebrew version, it will say, come, let's get off the road and go to the city of the Jebusites, which means that it's not even on the local road. You see it from a distance, but it would not be on the local road. So please keep that fact in mind, because we'll try to answer the question, what made Jerusalem so unique, and what could it be if it was not the location. The time frame, we're going to speak about two main eras today. We're going to speak about the days of the Canaanites and the United Monarchy. And then we're going to speak also about the Roman days, because Hezekiah's tunnel led to the pool of Siloam, which is also mentioned in the Gospels. So we'll speak a little bit about John chapter 9. That's where Jesus sent the blind man to wash his eyes so he could see. So that will be the time frame that we are going to speak about. We are going now to the very beginning of the story, but we are not done yet with the location. Salem, Jebus, City of David, Jerusalem, different names to the very same location, and that location is very small in dimensions. So let's try to see what is the problem. It's not on the main trade routes. It's not rich with water sources. One spring only that would not sustain such a large population. We speak about a place that doesn't have enough farmland to sustain a large population, and we speak about a place that doesn't have any natural resources. So the question should be, why Jerusalem? Well, as I said, the Bible doesn't give us a clear reason, but we can connect Jerusalem with many things that happened in the scriptures. For example, the Bible tells us that God is going to choose a place for the Israelites as they're going to go through the desert. Well, this is a little bit of a mystery, because when was the place chosen? This is important now to know. Every now and then you read the book of Judges, the book of Joshua, and you come to the verse that speaks about the Israelites worshiping on high places. Usually it will be connected to the statement, those days there was no king in Israel, every man did what was right in his own eyes. Well, we have to look into that for just a second. See, the problem was not that much worshiping God on the high places. The problem was worshiping images or worshiping idols. This is strictly forbidden by the second commandment. But think about the problem here. For 500 years, the nation lives in the country. God did not choose the one place of worship yet. People want to worship the God that brought them out from the land of Egypt. Where do they go? And therefore, every community, every town, every tribe had few locations, sometimes inside the city, in order to worship God. That was not the main problem. When the Bible speaks about it, it's not justifying it. But the Bible mentions to us sometimes in the book of Judges, it was before the one place of worship was chosen. And therefore, for close to 500 years, the nation lives its life. Many things happen along the way, but there was no one central place of worship. Shiloh, the tabernacle, was not the place of worship. People worship God on high places. That was not the main problem. The problem was worshiping idols, and that will be, of course, the same. But once the place was chosen, and that will happen only in the days of David, worshiping any other location will be considered, of course, a big no-no. So we speak about that problem. When was the place chosen? Only in the days of David and not before that. When you go to some other references, the Bible speaks about the days of David, and after David had sinned and sent Joab to count the fighting men, the angel of the Lord is coming to destroy Jerusalem, and God stops it, and the prophet Gad tells David to go up and purchase the mountaintop and build an altar. We believe that to be, of course, the very top of Mount Moriah. And then the Bible speaks about some other places and other connections, but there are some traditions as well. We believe that the top of Mount Moriah is the foundation stone. When God started to create this universe, he started right there. This is stone number one, if you wish. We believe that he created Adam in the very same location. The binding of Isaac in Genesis 22 took place in the same location, and so did the dream of Jacob. Genesis 28 speaks about Jacob having a dream, and he sees the sky open and the ladder goes into the sky and the angels climbing up and down. And he woke up to say, this is Bethel, the house of God. We believe the very same location. And of course, that will be the threshing floor that David will purchase after he was ordered by Gad to go up to the mountain and purchase the place from the local Jebusite. And then, of course, after the place was chosen, David was the one to purchase the location, but the builder will be Solomon. We'll speak about that in our next lecture in a couple of days. But maybe there was another reason why to choose Jerusalem. For David, coming from the tribe of Judah, he needed a place that was totally neutral, not a place that was connected to one of the tribes, because if you choose a city that was in the land of each of the tribes, you favor the tribe above all the others. Jebus was the only alien, if you wish, location like an enclave that was on the mountains surrounded by the Israelites but was never conquered by them and they were inhabited by them, and therefore that was a place to start. So you cannot say that you are favoring one tribe over the other. It was a neutral location. Happened in history more than once that this was a decision to choose a place. Maybe one of the reasons was also that location and its political position before the days of David. Let's speak about the city's topography because it's getting very significant. When you speak about topography, I need to bring up the mountains and the valleys, and we'll do that one at a time. We'll start with the Kidron. The Kidron Brook is on the eastern side. Kidron means a dark place. The place is also known by the name, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. In the book of Joel chapter 3, Jehoshaphat means God will judge, a place of judgment for the nations. That will be the town limit on the eastern side. On the western side, the Central Valley will be in the center, but it's not that important. On the western side, we'll have the Hinnom Valley. This is Gehenna, the Hinnom Valley. And if these are the valleys, you do understand that in between are the hills and the mountains. The other valleys, which are not that important, will be all around the city. We want to focus on the three, the Kidron Brook, Central Valley, and the Valley of Gehenna. This will be the eastern hill. The eastern hill is called Mount Moriah. It's not just the city of David. The city of David covers the southern slope of Mount Moriah. All of it is called Mount Moriah. It's about 1.5 miles long. That's where the temple was built later on. And if you go to the very northern side, the highest part of Mount Moriah, that's the Garden Tomb. So we speak about the mountain range, which is about 1.5 miles long. The southern slope of it, that's where the spring flows, will be the city of David or Jebus or Salem. And then we speak about the western hill, the lower city, the upper city. These will be significant from the days of King Hezekiah. And then we speak about the days of Jesus some other time. We'll speak about the new city as well. Let's have an air photo of the area from the early 20s of the last century. The Kidron Brook is on the eastern side. You have the Valley of Hinnom on the other side, the western side, the Central Valley, the Tyropean is cutting through. And of course, the city of David will be on the southern slope of Mount Moriah. All of this is Mount Moriah. The hills on the right-hand side, Mount Scopus, and then the Mount of Olives and the Mount of Corruption. All of that is also called the Mount of Olives. Mount of Corruption is the place where Solomon built temples to the gods of his wives. And these temples were overlooking the city of David, the Bible says clearly, and the temple at Mount Moriah as well. So that's how the city used to look like, the mountains and the valleys of it. And that will be a bird's view, so to speak. Maybe it helps to begin to get the picture, and the details are important. So zooming in to see the city of David. True, the city is surrounded by higher mountains. You go to Psalms 125, it says very clearly, as the mountains round about Jerusalem, etc. And you would wonder, you have a big disadvantage here. Anybody can cover you with fire because you're not on top of the hill. Well, let me submit to you, based on the weapons that people used back then, none of them had long enough range to threaten Jerusalem. So although you are lower than the rest of the area, you cannot be under enemy's fire, so to speak. And the town itself was guarded by deep valleys. Kidron is very deep, so is the Central Valley. There was another one here that connected the two. So the city itself was well protected by valleys from 4 directions. Only later on, Solomon will change some of the topography. And therefore, we speak about a place which is under the mountains around, but it was not a disadvantage necessarily. There's only one such location in the country, and that would be Shiloh. Interesting, that's where the tabernacle used to stand. Has to be a reason why the places chosen for the worship of God of Israel were not the high mountains in the area, but down in a valley. There was an answer, by the way, but I need you to wait until we'll speak about a temple, and that will be our next lecture in a couple of days. So that will be the area, a very small place, maybe 15 acres in size, which we call the city of David. Always keep in mind, part of Mount Moriah. And to bring that to conclusion before a short video, in Solomon's days, some of the topography had changed as well. Solomon was the one that built the temple. The place was purchased by David. The builder was Solomon. Until then, you do see that there was a little depression here that protected the city of David on the northern side as well. So until the days of David, the city had steep hillsides protecting it from every location. It was Solomon that filled up that depression. Today, it's one continuous slope that leads up to Temple Mount, but this was only done in Solomon's days. The Bible tells us when Solomon builds a temple, he is employing 150,000 Canaanite slaves in order to fill up that depression. So the city's topography, as you see today, is not the natural lines. Some things have changed in Solomon's days. Let me bring up a little video here to bring that to conclusion, speaking about the orientation and speaking about the city's topography. Bear with me for just a second as I bring up that, and I think that that will help, all right, to understand how exactly the place used to look like. Just a minute. Bring it up once again. That should work now. 360 around the city of David to understand the location better. If you go to the Bible, the book of Psalms 125, verse 2 says, as the mountains round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is all around his people. That will be a very accurate description of Jerusalem back then, not anymore today. It is indeed a place dominated by mountains from all around. Think about the gigantic arena, natural one, surrounded by higher hills. Looking out to the east, and you see the Mount of Olives, and I'm focusing now on the southern peak of Mount of Olives, which is also known by the name the Mount of Shame, the Mount of Abomination. Once upon a time, Solomon built temples to the gods of his wives on the mountain overlooking the city, the Bible tells us, and that will be the region for the name, the Mount of Shame, the Mount of Scandal, the Mount of Abomination. Down below us, the very deep canyon of the Kidron Valley. You can only imagine how David, a young ruler, is standing at the bottom of the valley, wondering how on earth he's going to conquer the well-fortified city of James. On the southern side, you see the Mount of the Evil Council. Tradition has it that when the high priest got the Sanhedrin together for the first time to decide to give Jesus over to the Romans, that was in the summer palace that was located outside the city walls, hence the name the Mount of the Evil Council. Also, that was a place that Abraham saw Moriah, which is right now behind us, coming from south. This mountain is on the southern side. You cannot see Mount Moriah, which is lower, before you're standing on top of that hill. So that's where God told him to leave the servants and take the boy and the wood and the fire and go to Mount Moriah. That's where we are standing right now. Moving the camera to the west, that will be the western hill outside the city limits until the days of King Hezekiah, which is also known in the book of Josephus Flavius by the name the Upper City, better known today as Mount Zion. It's confusing. Biblical Mount Zion is indeed Mount Moriah. Go to Psalms 42, the Bible reads Mount Zion on the side of the north, the city of the great king. So Mount Zion biblically is Mount Moriah on the northern side of the city of David. However, in the 5th century, a church was built on top of that hill, and they called it Saint Zion, and ever since the name shifted to the upper city of Jerusalem. You see now, of course, the 16th century war and part of the Jewish quarter tried to ignore those and focus only on the topography as we are completing a 360 heading now to the north. That will be the continuation of the hillside that we go all the way to the top of Mount Moriah. So we are standing now on the southern slope of a mountain ridge about 1.5 miles long. That will be Mount Moriah. The southern part is the town of David, Jabus, because of one reason only. The local spring, and the only one that flows in the area, flows at the bottom of the hill. That will be our destination. Well, I hope that that really helped and you're able kind of to connect all those pieces and dots to understand one complete picture about the city's location. It's time to move to history. We spoke about the location enough, I believe, so let's carry on and speak about history. First appearance of Jerusalem in archaeology. Well, we do have evidences in the city as far as the 30th century BCE. And this is absolutely interesting, but no material in writing. I'm going to speak about this for just a minute because the prophet Ezekiel, when he gave a history lesson to the Judeans in the Babylonian exile, he was the national teacher, he would say the following: your father was an Amorite and your mother was a Hittite, speaking about Jerusalem's history predating David. Everybody knew about what happened in the city from the days of David. The stories went on from father to son, no doubt. The question is, what happened in Jerusalem before the days of David? You do know Melchizedek was the king of Salem, that's predating David. And the prophet Ezekiel is mentioning two civilizations that dwelt on the mountains. Amorites is number one, and the Hittites is number two. The term Amorite is coming from a word, from a language called Akkadian. The first alphabet that was ever invented, so to speak, was the Sumerian Akkadian alphabet cuneiform text. And they called everybody on the western side of their area Amorites, which means west, which means that if you lived on the western side to Mesopotamia, you had the title Amorite. It was a geographical description, not indicating your religion, etc. And you go to Joshua 5:1, the Bible says that the Amorites dwelt on the mountains and the Canaanites by the sea. Canaanites are merchants. So this is a distinction based on the Kami's topography, who occupies what part of the country. Amorites, one of the 7 nations in Canaan that the Israelites were ordered to destroy. And the Bible tells us in the days of Abraham, he was a friend with the Amorites. And therefore, Salem under Melchizedek would be called an Amorite area, and the name of town was Salem. Who were the Hittites? A mighty empire that occupied the area of Asia Minor, that's modern Turkey of today, and it was shattered to pieces by an invasion, in fact, a migration. We speak about the sea people, as the Bible calls them. The Bible only mentions 1 of 9 or 10 clans or tribes. He mentioned the Philistines only, but they were not the only ones. Others came by land, and on their way, seeking a new homeland after they were driven out from Greece by the Greeks, as we know them today, they destroyed the Hittite Empire, and many of those refugees fled to the mountains of Canaan and occupied Salem, take it from the locals to establish the town of Jebus, occupied by Hittites. Uriah may be the most famous one, but there's no doubt that these are the two civilizations that lived on the mountains of the country, Jerusalem included, before the days of David. So speaking about history, that will be the first appearances of Jerusalem historically, speaking about the Hittites and speaking about the Amorites. Later on, we also have some information which is really interesting coming from what we call the execration text. I did mention that in one of the other lectures, and this was an Egyptian custom. Before the Egyptian army is going to fight against an enemy, they used to make those clay figurines, write the name of the enemy on it, and curse it in every possible way, and then smash it down to the ground, hoping that that's what will happen to the enemy in the battlefield as well. Part of the procedure was that they used to saturate it in urine, bury it, and whatever you can to humiliate your future enemy. And one of those figurines was found with the name Jerusalem on it, which means that Jerusalem was on the list of the Egyptians as strategic locations in Canaan. It also means that they lost it for somebody else. And therefore, this is, for the 19th century BC, the days of Abraham. Maybe this one speaks about the days of Melchizedek, although no name was found for the king. And for the Egyptians, to go into the hill country, that was not very common. The Egyptian army was based on war chariots, and very seldom they would leave the comfort zone, which means the low land. That's where the trade routes used to go anyhow, and go into the hill country. So at least on one occasion, it was important enough for them to assault the town of Jebus or the town of Jerusalem. Another document which is absolutely important are the letters of El Amarna. This was the archive of the Egyptian Foreign Office from the late 1400s. Is Pharaoh corresponding with vassal kings, including the king of Jerusalem. 381 tablets were found, also in cuneiform writing, and it's not only that he gives orders, the king of Jerusalem responds, which means that in Jebus was a layer of professional scribes and diplomats and tax collectors well integrated in the region. Keep in mind that David's men did not master those skills. And maybe that's why David decided not to wipe out the Jebusites, but to invite them into his society, into his civilization. So when we speak about what predated David, we do have information in archaeology, which brings us now to the days of David and to the days of the Bible, the days of Joshua, etc. Well, the first appearance in the Bible, by the way, this is one of those El Amarna tablets, and you do see highlighted will be the name or whatever, the cuneiform for Jerusalem, or Ushalimu, if we know even how to pronounce it right today. Well, Jerusalem is mentioned, of course, in the days of Melchizedek, the days of Abraham in Genesis 14, and then it is mentioned also in the days of Joshua. There was a list in Joshua 12 of 31 cities conquered by Joshua. Jerusalem is on that list. And also we are told that Adoni-Tzedek was the king of Jerusalem, and he led a coalition of local kings to try to stop the Israelites, the tribes of Israel, from conquering the mountains. Adoni-Bezek, another one that was conquered and defeated in another place, was brought to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was, at least for a while, occupied by the tribe of Judah, maybe the tribe of Benjamin as well. The Bible does say here that Jerusalem was taken by Judah, but we do know for a fact it was not inhabited by them. So the place was conquered, maybe burned down, but we do know beyond any doubt that Jerusalem did not become part of the Israelite territory, not until the days of David. And then, of course, David took the stronghold of Zion, and that will start a new era in the city's history, but also in the nation's history. So the first appearance in the Bible is coming from the days of Joshua and the conquest of the land by the Israelites. Once again, to bring topography once again to some conclusion, I do want to show you that, and just to demonstrate that Mount Moriah, which is this one, is lower from the upper city and lower than the Mount of Olives as well. So what is it that we're going to see when we are going to visit the city of David? We're going to see a section from David's palace. Let me say that David's palace is a place in the city of David that was identified by an archaeologist by the name of Eilat Mazar. She is the one that works in the city for more than 10 years now, and that was her idea. Not everybody agrees. She based her idea because of one main reason. It's on the very top of the hill, and you do expect the palace to be located on top to see every house down below you, including every rooftop. Yes, I'm insinuating the Bathsheba story. But also she found something that reminded her a Phoenician palace. She found a capital of a pillar that was very common in Phoenicia as well. And the Bible tells us David's palace was built by engineers sent by Hiram, the king of Sidon, who was the first international ally of David. So she claims it's a Phoenician style of a structure and therefore has to be part of David's palace. As I said, not every scholar agree. Most of them basically disagree. We're going to see part of the city wall, either from the days of the Jebusites or maybe it was a retaining wall built to support the city of David, or maybe both. It's possible that the engineers sent from Siloam were using some of the city's previous walls in order to use that as a retaining wall for David's palace. We're going to see a section from Nehemiah's wall, and most important will be the water system, quite an amazing one when it comes to Jerusalem that was built before the days of King Hezekiah, but we'll speak about Hezekiah's tunnel. That was maybe the ultimate project in the days of the Old Testament of high skills of water engineering. I will mention the pool of Siloam, obviously, maybe the Pilgrim's Road, and show you some artifacts that were found in the excavations as well. So we're going to start touring the very city, going from place to place, and I would like to bring up some of the information by using some of the DVDs that I'm using. So just a minute, or the videos. Let's see how this is working. And that should work just fine. Just bear with me for a second, and we're going to make it work. Okay, here we go. And I have to apologize for the noise in the background. Keep in mind the city lives its life, and there's a lot of noise.
This area is believed to be the government section. You do see over that direction the structure with columns. They found that with a lot of pieces of pottery inside, including some for struggles. A struggle is a piece of pottery with some inscription on it. And this one is mentioned twice, a family called Achel. So no reason to doubt that that was maybe the house of one of the aristocrats of Jerusalem back then. Next to it, they found a group of 51 booths. The booths were kind of made of clay that you used to have in the impression, usually the logo of the family. And when you wanted to see the document, you used to stamp it in wax. And then you have the impression after that in order to open the document, you have to break that seal. And that was the indication that the place or the document was read by somebody else without permission, etc. 51 were found, and some of them have maybe been from the scriptures. And therefore, the excavations here were absolutely important. Next to it, the stone was found with a hole in it. Guess what that would be for? Bedrooms, no doubt. And to find bedrooms in a private individual's homes in Jerusalem 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, it also indicates a high level, if you wish, of living. And it's amazing. They checked what they could find under it to try to see what was the diet of people in Jerusalem. Gross, I have to agree. But I found a lot of stuff, including bones of fish that you only find in the River Nile. So that indicates some trade that was going on between the city-state of Jebus, even before the days of David, and Egypt, or all the other commodities that were using the ancient highway that was going about 40 miles away from here along the Mediterranean Sea.
Well, I hope that you're able to follow some of it. And again, I need to apologize for all the noise, but keep in mind, this is before the tourist season, so there are no groups in the area, which makes it possible, but there's always a lot of noise, construction, etc. Let's carry on and go back to the presentation after we've seen the beginning of the story of Jerusalem itself and how that place used to look like. So we are going to see all of the above. And here is how the city used to look like back then. The Palace of David is here. We just saw this retaining wall. This is maybe from the days of the Jebusites. We walk a little bit along the water system, the ancient one, to go to the spring of Gihon, Hezekiah's tunnel, and the pool of Siloam. Not going to speak about the tombs of the house of David, because this used to be, or accepted by many people, to be the one, but not anymore today. It was a team led by Raymond Weil, an archaeologist that was sent over by the Baron Rothschild from France. And he was in the opinion that he excavated and found the tombs of David's and David's house. Again, made a lot of noise back in 1913, 1914, and not anymore today. Just to give credit to some of the excavators, because you need to understand that Jerusalem, city of David, was a place that was excavated more than any other place on the planet. You do understand the attraction, and once opportunity presented itself, nobody will at least try to come or stop on coming, bribing the authorities, try to get as close as possible to Temple Mount to excavate. The first dig that took place in the city, that we can call a professional dig, was in 1867. It was led by Charles Warren, a British military engineer, who was sent over and funded by the Palestine Exploration Fund. He was the first one that gave us some information about the city, drawing the first sketches and gave us some good material that many others would use later on. Many other teams came, and just to mention some, Parker's team was quite a controversial one, but he hired a local professional archaeologist, a Catholic priest called Father Yves Vincent, and Vincent was the one that marked and actually sketched the details for the first time Hezekiah's tunnel. His work was so precise that even today they are using the measurements and information that he did in 1911. Later on, Raymond Val, as I mentioned, and fasting forward to Catherine Canyon, quite a well-known archaeologist that excavated Jerusalem 1961 to 67. Please keep in mind that this part of Jerusalem was not in Israeli hands until 1967. 1948, when the state was born, this part of town ended up in the Jordanian hands, and therefore Israeli archaeologists only had a chance to start digging there after the war of 1967. Igal Shiloh was one of them, and the last two, which left a mark behind, are Ronny and Eli Shukron, and they led more than 10 years of excavating in the city of David. So let's go back now to the presentation after we saw how the city used to look like, and carry on. All right, once again, I do point at the sketch of Jerusalem here and the retaining walls of the Jebusites. Enough being said about that, so I don't want to go into too more details now because the time is short. I do want to point to that corner here. This is believed by archaeologists to be a section from Nehemiah's wall. This is the retaining wall from the Jebusite period, and this one you see was almost added a little later on, so that would be a section from Nehemiah's wall. The Bible says that when Nehemiah was riding his donkey or mule or horse around the walls of Jerusalem, he came to a place that the pile of stones was so steep and so high that his own mule could not climb it. So maybe he decided not to bother with this part of destruction, and he simply made the city wall a little smaller, and he did not include all of that in his walls, but he built on top of the walls of the city of David, leaving some of the pile of stones outside. So you can see this is different in style than what you see here. So this is believed to be part of Nehemiah's wall over here. Look at the layers, all right? City of David, the walls of Nehemiah, maybe the walls of the Maccabees. There's no clear line here to mark one or the other. It's just the principle of city walls are simply piled up one above the other. And you see some of the bulls that I mentioned earlier in the video. Let's get now to the important parts in the city. That will be the water system, the water reservoir. Let me bring up once again a little video, if I may. And that's to show you how the spring of Gihon used to look like. All right, it's going to be a little noisy as the water flows, so there's no point to say much when we go there, but I'm sure that you will, hope so, that you will enjoy what you're going to see.
Making my way downstairs to Hezekiah's tunnel in the spring, you can hear the noise of flowing water. It's going to be too noisy once I get closer, and therefore I won't speak, but just let you see and understand. This is the entrance to Hezekiah's tunnel. I'm not going to go through it. When you catch it on the other side.
Okay, this was it. Water is freezing cold, by the way. But what you saw right now would be indeed the entrance to Hezekiah's tunnel. And I was standing right here. That would be the spring. Even before the days of King Hezekiah, people that wanted to take water back home, and that was a daily task for every family, they had to go underground and follow this man-made pier that went all the way to what is called today Warren's Shaft, named after Charles Warren, and go down to the spring. The spring was outside the walls of the city. City walls are up here. It was protected by its own wall, but that was not strong enough to stop a massive army, as it will be when the Assyrians will come to attack the city. For that reason, Hezekiah, that had to prepare the city for siege, was the one to dig a tunnel. Until the days of King Hezekiah, there was no Hezekiah's tunnel. Sounds obvious. Until then, water was flowing from the spring outside through a tunnel into the Kidron Valley. That was the source of irrigation. So you would come to the spring to take water back home, but part of it was carried outside in order to irrigate the terraces that covered the bottom of the Kidron Brook. Once you divert water and you want to protect your spring and you take the water to the other side, that tunnel that was carrying water once upon a time is now dry. So we call it the Canaanite dry tunnel, but it was not a dry tunnel to begin with. It was the one that carried water from the spring for irrigation purposes. This is an amazing project. Let me give you some data so you will understand how amazing was the job. Number one, the reasons for its construction. Well, 701 BCE, we speak about the fatal mistake that Hezekiah made politically, and the man was a good king. No doubt the Bible praises him and the reformation that he led to destroy the high places. When it comes to politics, he simply refused to listen. There was a global war back then between two enemy empires. The rising one was Assyria, the declining one was Egypt. Hezekiah and Judea was more close to the Egyptians, and Hezekiah wanted to choose sides. The problem is, if you choose an ally, you choose an enemy. He would refuse to listen to the prophet Isaiah, who gave him good advice. Isaiah said basically, don't choose sides, trust in God, you'll be fine. In other words, your kingdom is not important enough to draw the attention of all the others. If you stay neutral, it will guarantee your survival. Well, the king refused to listen. He chose the Egyptians, which means that the Assyrians are coming, and sure enough, King Sennacherib is leading his army, not to conquer Jerusalem, but to confront the Egyptians. But since Hezekiah sided with the Egyptians, he was in harm's way as well. So to prepare the city, he had to protect the water source, and that was the idea behind this operation. It's 533 meters long, all right? And again, the data is absolutely important and amazing how it was accomplished. From here to here, as a crow flies, it's only 320. But you do understand, if it's only 320 here, why bother to carve out a tunnel which is close to 600 yards long? Well, one reason could be to try to have a moderate slope so the water will not flow too quickly. And the slope, which is also amazing, is 0.06 slope. This is only 33 centimeters in elevation higher than the destination. So you have to design a path which meanders in a way just to keep a certain slope and a grade, and that's the big accomplishment. Teams are working from both sides. How do you know to which direction to advance, and not just to meet one another, to maintain a certain slope? Sometimes you work under a bedrock which is close to 100 feet high above you. So we speak quite about an accomplishment of water engineering. It took them about 250 days to complete that, and they carved out 600 cubic meters of material. They could work 24/7. If you use torches or oil lamps, the problem is the lack of oxygen inside, so they had to dig some ventilation piers as well, and to make sure that they're advancing one at the other, because if you miss, you get 2 tunnels for the price of one. And then when they met, they left an inscription. The inscription was found very close to the exit by the pool of Siloam. And it's a question, why have the inscription hidden in the tunnel? If you want to glorify those diggers, you should place it in the town square at the gatehouse. But no, it was found almost hidden on the walls of the tunnel. It was found in 1880. Somebody tried to carve it out and broke it to pieces. It was taken to the museum in Istanbul, so it's not on display in Jerusalem. We only have some copies of it. So Hezekiah's tunnel was maybe the most important accomplishment that was done in the city of Jerusalem, anywhere in the country, when it comes to water engineering. So started here and went all the way down. Another possibility why it's so meandering, not just for the slope, but maybe those people tried to follow the rock that was softer. There's more than one rock that makes the mountains of Jerusalem. Dolomite is a very tough limestone. You try to avoid that. chalk is not that tough and you can chisel through chalk much easier. So maybe they followed the tunnel, not just the slope, which was the main problem, but tried to carve through softer rock and not the tough one. Anyway, they did it. We do not know exactly, but the bottom line is very clear. They did it. And therefore the city was saved, and Jerusalem did not surrender to the Assyrians. Pool of Siloam, another amazing discovery that was made by sheer chance. For years and years and years, there was a small water reservoir that everybody pointed at and called it the Pool of Siloam. 2004, as most big discoveries by sheer chance, they had some road construction over there, some sewage problems, and as they were digging to try to fix the pipeline, they came across a broad staircase that went deeper and deeper. The archaeologists were absolutely excited because by sheer chance, they did excavate, after all those decades of searching Jerusalem, the Pool of Siloam as we know it today. And it changed some of the understanding as well, how the water system was working. Until then, we were positive that the tunnel emptied directly inside the pool. However, what was found is interesting. We found a continuation of Hezekiah's tunnel that goes around the pool, and then you had those drainage canals basically that could carry water from the main tunnel to fill up water according to their will. So you can basically synchronize, you can control how much water you want to fill in the pool. The rest of it will go out to the Kidron Brook. So this is a east-west view, understand. This will be the upper city, city of David or Mount Moriah, and this will be the central valley that I mentioned to you earlier. Well, let's bring up another video segment, if I may, that speaks about the Pool of Siloam. And I hope that you'll be able to enjoy that as well. So bear with me for just a second and see if it works. Should see how it's supposed to go. Again, just a minute and I'll be with you. That should work now.
15 years ago, so, as always by sheer chance, an amazing discovery was made. This was a public road where we're standing right now, and they had to do some constructions in the area. And while removing the road, they discovered the Pool of Siloam. For centuries upon centuries, people were looking to go to the different location, claiming that this is the Pool of Siloam. That was a wrong identification. This is the one. Some of the stairs that you see here were built in the days of King Hezekiah. That would be the main water reservoir at the destination to the tunnel he was digging. And some of it was built in the days of David the Great. But the question is, what was it for? In the days of Hezekiah, no doubt, that was a drinking water reservoir that Hezekiah specially made to protect the spring from the hands of the enemy. But the Romans knew better than this. The Romans did not drink water from open pools. They knew this is not healthy for you. You'll have some algae, some dirt in it. And therefore, in the Roman days, they were using those pools for irrigation, for laundry, and all kinds of industry. But it's possible also that that was the largest mikveh in the world. We'll speak about the cleansing facility. When you think about the masses coming to Jerusalem for the holidays, and Josephus Flavius mentions to us that one Passover, they offered 250,000 lambs. That's a lamb for a family. We speak about millions. Everybody was on the way to the temple. And before you go to the temple, you have to cleanse yourself. And the temple did not have that many facilities. So possible, as some scholars believe, that the Pool of Siloam in the days of Jesus, in the days of the Second Temple, was no longer a drinking water reservoir, but it was basically a gigantic mikveh. One reason to think that is the way that the stairs are built. You see that there's a flight of 5 stairs and then a large platform, and then there was another flight of 5 stairs and another one, a few more flights down there. So the possibility is that people could come down halfway and then they could rest here and cleanse themselves before going back to the main road that we are going today and make their way along a very steep hillside all the way up to the temple. In the 5th century, under the Empress Eudokia, who divorced her husband, Justinian, she came to Theodosius, she came to Jerusalem backed by the imperial treasury, and she built a church here that commemorates what the Bible tells us in the Gospel of John chapter 9. The Bible speaks about Jesus sending the blind man all the way from the temple down to the Pool of Siloam, which means send in Hebrew, and that's where he washed his eyes after Jesus spit on the dirt and made some mud to smear over his eyes. That's why he washed his face a couple of times so he could see. You don't remember the controversy as a result of that. So Eudokia was the one that filled up some of the pool, and you see the filling over there, on top of which a church was built. Today, the whole area is in the hands of the Greek Orthodox Church, which means we'll never be able to complete the excavation, unfortunately. So we only have half of it, the eastern half of the pool of Siloam. So clear that filling, fill everything up with water, and you get a picture how the pool used to look like.
Well, the sizes of the pool are also quite interesting. It's about 3 acres in size. Well, this is a lot, and this is a big one. And keep in mind that the annual flow of the spring of Gihon, is about 600,000. Not everything was used to fill up the pool, obviously, but you do understand how large was that water reservoir. But we're coming almost close to the conclusion of our presentation, City of David. A couple of other things I'd like to share with you. When you speak about the pool of Siloam and you see the sizes of it, as we mentioned, this part of it is about 250 feet long. So once again, you understand the sizes of it. Well, let's bring it to some conclusion now, and please ignore what you read up here. This slide was meant to do something different. City of David, therefore, the southern slope of Mount Moriah, not a very large area. We mentioned that many times. We started here by the palace, and we saw the retaining wall of the Jebusites. We saw the water system, and we walked down to the spring of Gihon and walked along the pool, or the Hezekiah's tunnel, so to speak, all the way down to the pool of Siloam. Although it's not very big, but keep in mind, everything the Bible speaks about that took place in Jerusalem until the days of King Hezekiah happened in this small town. The streets of this town, David was walking, and Solomon was mounted on David's mule to go from the palace down to the spring when he was made king. And Absalom was standing at one of the gates here, trying to convince anybody who came to seek judgment from his father that his father is not a just judge, and Absalom will be much more just to every individual to lead the nation to a big rebellion. All that, and the Bible speaks about a lot of events in the area took place in a very small geographical location, only 15 acres in size. I would like to show you one last thing before we farewell, and this is called the Pilgrim's Highway. It's part of the City of David, definitely. We cannot walk it so far, unfortunately, but it will be open when people are going to come to Jerusalem, when everything will be ready for the people to come, where the times will be better. It will be one of the most fascinating opportunities, will be to walk up what is called the Pilgrim's Road, that you're going to see at least part of it in just 8 minutes.
Well, brand new discovery, which is not even open yet for visits. So I had to ask special permit from the guard here to climb some of these stairs. That would be the Pilgrim's Road. So think about those multitudes coming to Jerusalem, maybe cleansing themselves in the pool of Siloam, and then taking those stairs that will take them all the way up to the temple. That's quite a steep climb, as you understand, walking from the bottom of the City of David up to Mount Moriah, up to Temple Mount. Place is not open yet to go the full length of it. They're working, and whenever the tourist season will be back and tourists will come back to the country, you will be able to walk the full length of it. Keep in mind, you're walking on stairs that made the streets of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago.
Okay, well, I hope that you are able to appreciate how important that discovery is. Let's just have a refreshing end to the whole thing and go and see part of Hezekiah's tunnel. You don't need to understand the challenge here. It's very narrow, not easy to walk, and you're going inside. It's freezing cold, and you use a flashlight, etc. And fortunately, these days, the place is so quiet because nobody comes to visit. Otherwise, there's so many people inside. It's really hard to enjoy walking through the tunnel or to take any kind of footage inside the tunnel. So have a refreshing experience.
Well, walking through Hezekiah's tunnel is always an amazing experience. See, the ceiling is about 15 feet above me, and look how narrow is the tunnel. Getting closer now to the exit. One of those very slowly on the spring, about 600 yards away from here. Fill up the pool. inscription that discovers, that describes the moment that the two kings met. It was not the meeting point, but that's where they built that. The question is why? It's so hidden. Nobody would see that. If you want to glorify the builders for the major effort, you should do that in a public place. But they did not. It was carved out, broken in the process, and now it's in the museum in Istanbul in Turkey. Keep heading out and get to the exit in just a minute. It was an adventure to be able to walk through the tunnel that was dug by King Hezekiah to protect the city water source 2,700 years ago.
Okay, folks, well, this is it for this time. I hope that I was able to set the scene and to give you some understanding about the city's location, about the history of Jerusalem before the days of David, and to speak about the first years of the city as a capital for the nation of Israel. When we'll speak about the temple next time, we'll ask some questions about the centrality of the temple, about how was it built, and of course about how was the temple practices. We're going to speak about Temple Mount in our next session. We're going to cover a long time in the Temple Mount's history, including the significance to Jews, Christians, and Muslims as well. So thank you for joining me once again. I hope that this was a blessing to you, and may the God of Israel richly bless you all. Bye-bye.